Now that your students have some sort of inkling about what lines are, it's good to bring it back to the real world and give them a sort of example of lines that they actually see out there. So a classic example of a line in the real world is the trajectory of a bullet. And in this case, the point that you start with is the muzzle, the end of the gun, and the slope is just the direction that it's aimed. Now, of course, in the real world, those bullets eventually fall to the ground, and so they're not a straight line, but you have to go out a long way to have that happen. Of course, a line can be a lot easier to calculate with than a parabola or an ellipse, especially if you're only working over a short distance where you're not even going to notice the difference. Forsaking a bit of accuracy in a model can be a great trade-off if you get actual workability out of it. A great life lesson in general. Sometimes take a little shortcut and get the problem done. As for parallel lines in the real world, floorboards are a good example. Of course, they're not really parallel lines because they stop at the end of the room. And in fact, if you've been in a house with sort of rickety old floorboards, they have little gaps sometimes, which means that they're not perfectly parallel either. But just as a great approximation that we see in the real world, floorboards. Train tracks too often look parallel, although again, in the real world, train tracks tend to curve at some point, even if they curve together. The whole idea here is just to give your students a sense that some of these things exist out there in sort of approximations, and that can be really useful.